السادة، ستبدأ الآن كلمة رئيسية يقدمها السيد كوستي بيريكوس من شركة ديلويت العالمية. Ladies and gentlemen, a keynote by Costi Perricos from Deloitte is starting now.
Ladies, gentlemen, Your Excellencies, good morning. I'm absolutely delighted to be here to talk to you about generative AI, which you've heard about all morning. I've attended some very interesting sessions, but specifically looking about what it means for business, both the opportunities and some of the risks. By way of introduction, I am Costi Perricos. I lead our Office of Generative AI globally for Deloitte. And today's session will be based on the many, many projects we're doing in this field, the over 100 conversations we've had with CXOs, but also importantly, the transformation journey that we are applying to ourselves. Before we go forward and look at the opportunities, I think it's important actually to look a little bit back in time around how this whole thing started. Because it may be surprising to some of you to know that this technology is not new. In fact, our story starts back in 2017 when Google published an article called "Attention is All You Need." And in that article, they introduced the transformer algorithm, which changed the way AI understands language today. Up and until that particular point in time, and I'm simplifying this, apologies to the technical audience, basically algorithms understood language by simply predicting the next word in a sentence based on the previous word, which was great, but it meant that it lacked context. So for example, if you were saying, "I'm going to the bank," the algorithms wouldn't understand whether you're going to the bank to pay in a check or whether you were going to the bank of the river to fish. This algorithm suggested a very new way of looking at things, not only comparing the previous word, but comparing every word in the sentence together, or every pixel in a picture together if you were not just dealing with language. And I can tell you, the results were astounding. So astounding, in fact, that everybody started adopting this algorithm. But that was 2017. And for many of us, sort of the general business community and the general public community, we didn't hear anything until November, December last year, when OpenAI launched GPT-3 with ChatGPT, the app that gave us all access to these models, and the world has changed, in my view, forever. So why did it take 4 years nearly for us to hear about this technology? Well, really, there's three main reasons, which are very relevant to business. The first is that this new algorithm was far, far more computationally intensive than anything that had been used before. And it follows logic. If you have to compare every word in the sentence together to predict a word, it's much, much more difficult than just simply predicting the last word. And we didn't really have that sort of computing power available at hand in 2017. It was available to research institutions because you had to use graphics processing units, GPUs. Since then, many companies, but particularly NVIDIA, who is producing 95% of the chips in this field, have made huge advances in the computing power, and this is now much more readily available, although I have to say it is still a problem in places like the Middle East and Europe in terms of accessibility to these chips. The second reason is that it's very difficult to do this sort of these sort of technologies without using cloud or a cloud-based infrastructure. It's very difficult to do that on-premise. And of course, cloud has come a very, very long way in the last 4 years. Much, much more accessible. And the last reason, which I think is actually the main reason, is the companies that were involved, the big tech companies, knew of the risks, knew of the issues, knew of the ethical considerations that this technology would bring. And they didn't feel that it was ready to release to the public. OpenAI thought differently. It has effectively let the genie out of the bottle, and the race is now on how we can all harness that technology and do it safely. So what does that actually mean? What does the future hold? Well, you can see at the end of that diagram we have artificial general intelligence. Now, I think it's always dangerous to predict the future in these examples because actually, we're not very good at doing it as humans, particularly when there's an exponential explosion of technology. And I personally, I've heard the sessions this morning, I think personally, general artificial intelligence is a bit further away than people think. The last 10% of these journeys are always very, very difficult. But I do know one thing for sure, the economic impact is going to be like something we've never seen before. This is just one example, 7 trillion over a 10-year period. And whether it's 7 or 10 or 5, depending on what study you look at, I can promise you one thing. The way we work with AI, the way we view AI, will never be the same. This is for us an iPhone or an electricity moment. But what does this technology do? I know that many of you understand text, but there are many other modalities. So if we start with text, all of you in this room have heard of ChatGPT, and I know we saw some examples of other tools as well. But text is really transforming the way business is doing things. You know, from simple productivity. I was talking to the CEO of a relatively small consumer goods company whose revenues are really directly based on how much they can market on Instagram. And he was telling me this is amazing because now they can produce twice as many articles a month just simply through tools like ChatGPT. They can ask it to optimize them for search engines, optimize them for social media. And they're doing twice as many articles, which means they're getting 80% more revenue a month at 20% of the cost. So for small companies, even simple tools like that are massive. But as you know, it doesn't end with text. I walked out of the auditorium. I don't know if you've been on the bridge. You see some amazing AI images that have been created of the region. They're absolutely beautiful. If you played with DALL-E, you will again see some incredible images. But they can also create photorealistic images, as you probably have seen. This is one of Donald Trump resisting arrest in New York, okay? It didn't happen, of course. This was created by AI, but it was so good that it fooled a whole number of news agencies to publish it. And it's now on the internet forever. If you don't like pictures of Trump being arrested, I would type Balenciaga Pope into Google. You'll see a wonderful picture of the Pope sporting a Balenciaga jacket, which, of course, was also false. Not only did the news agencies pick it up, it was a Balenciaga marketer's dream. The coat sold out apparently immediately as soon as it's hit. You'll be surprised how many people want to dress like the Pope. But again, you know, what this leads me to believe is that these days we cannot really believe what we see or hear in the press. And talking, of course, about hearing, there have been huge advances in audio in this field just in a very short time. I've been doing these presentations for a while. I wasn't really talking much about audio, but we're now seeing it really change the way we do music. So Paul McCartney has announced he's going to release a final album of the Beatles. On that album is going to be a song that John Lennon wrote before he died, and John Lennon's voice will be perfectly recreated, sort of bringing him back. On the flip side, I don't know if many of you know the actor Stephen Fry. He's a very famous British actor. You know, he announced that he came across a documentary that had been published, which had him narrating the whole documentary. And he said he hadn't uttered a single word or received a single penny in compensation. What they had done was they'd got all the audiobooks from Harry Potter that he narrates, trained an algorithm on his voice, and next thing you know, you have Stephen Fry for free. So it creates some challenges for the industries as well. In the interest of time, I'm going to talk about code later, but just bear that in mind. These algorithms can produce amazing code, and I think this is probably one of the biggest use cases we have in business, and I think it's going to be also one of the biggest drivers of this technology as well. So talking of use cases, what are we sort of seeing? You know, at Deloitte, we like to sort of categorize things so that we can understand them in frameworks, and we really see three big frameworks. One is around content personalization in its widest sense. Again, I think the audience is quite familiar with the opportunities for content in this space, but it does have some interesting corollaries. So for example, you know, I think it's going to affect the entire business of the internet. If you think about it, if you're a content creator, you at a very simple level, you'll create content for people to see, maybe get advertising revenue, but it relies on people looking at your original content. If going forward, everyone's going to be using these large language models that kind of summarize the content and pull it together, what is going to be the incentives of content creators to do that? And we know that human content creation is really, really important Because what we have discovered recently is that when you train these models on synthetic data, it lacks a certain bit of magic that humans, a certain bit of kind of unevenness that humans create, and it makes the models actually act worse than with human content. So some interesting things happening there. And of course, it's going to change the whole way we interact with customers. Having said that, I'm not going to make predictions. I'm going to make one. I predict that in 3 years' time, when you call a call center, because of the voice reproduction, the content reproduction, you're not going to know whether you're talking to a human being or you're talking to an AI being. And this, of course, has massive opportunities for many of our clients and many businesses that have call centers, but it also will have a massive impact on local economies that often rely on local call centers employing people. And of course, the metaverse, which is not as a hot topic as it was last year, is another area where we think this technology is going to be game-changing. The amount of content needed to be created in the metaverse is significant. I think the world was struggling with that, and this is really going to change things. But let's talk a little bit about coding. As I mentioned, these tools are really amazing at producing code. And they're not only amazing at producing code, they're amazing at looking at code and understanding it. Okay? So all of a sudden, these large lines of codes that have three comments in that the developer begrudgingly put in, you can now actually run these into these algorithms that'll tell you what the code's about, which means they can also create test scripts, which means a lot of the whole process of creating software can be automated in businesses. They're also really good at translating code. So if you imagine if you're a bank and you've got several million lines of COBOL code that was written by people 40 years ago that are certainly not with a bank anymore, and you don't know how to translate it into something new, how to move it into cloud, you can actually use these algorithms to translate the code into something more modern, like Python and Java. Not perfectly. We'll always need a human in the loop, but 60–70% effort is taken away, and then move it to cloud. And it's not just banks. One of the projects we're doing in the UK is with a UK government agency, and we're helping them translate legacy code into new code that they can then move into the cloud. But perhaps for me, I'm a human optimist. One of the greatest areas I think is going to be in industry domains. We've already seen these algorithms be used in AlphaFold, which was the protein folding algorithm that revolutionized the way we understand proteins and will revolutionize drug development. We're also seeing it appear in nuclear fusion, the management of nuclear fusion. We're also seeing it appear now more and more in things like climate change and analyzing climate change problems. So I think fundamentally, this technology is going to help drive humanity forward. Interestingly enough, I've had probably over 100 CXO conversations in the last few months on this topic. The first topic is always, okay, how's it going to affect my business? The second, which warms my heart, is risk, trust, and bias. This topic, which in previous AI waves probably took 2 or 3 years to become a thing. It took sort of racist algorithms and sexist algorithms and some really kind of, poor choices of design for people to talk about it. This is the number 2 topic after what does this technology do? And it's something that we all need to be very, very conscious of when we're implementing these algorithms. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time just talking about some of the risks that we see, okay? Now, I'm not going to focus on the ones at the bottom because they're technical, and actually technology is moving very, very fast. So probably by the end of this presentation, some of the facts from the beginning of this presentation will have changed. I wanted to focus on the ones in the top, because often when businesses implement these technologies, they focus on the technical side. They have the IT department involved. They've got their data science department involved. They don't have risk and legal involved. They don't have data privacy involved. And if you don't do that from the beginning, you're going to grind to a very abrupt halt somewhere down the road. Of that, I'm confident, based on many, many experiences that we have had. So the first thing is hallucinations. Yeah? These algorithms don't understand the difference between truth and fiction, or truth and a lie. They are designed to produce outputs, okay? And because they adopt human language, they produce those outputs very confidently. They will confidently tell you things that are not true. So when you are producing them, and we've seen that because we use these tools in our own organization, you have to have a human in the loop that actually understands the subject matter, can look at it, and can spot when things are not correct. You know, I won't lie, I use these algorithms sometimes when I'm preparing talks, and I often have to go back, search the internet, and make sure that what they're coming up with is correct. The second is of course, ethical use. Ethical use, massively important. You know, do not use these algorithms for you know, things around warfare or things that are going to affect humanity. There are guardrails in place, of course, in these algorithms, but it's not that they can't be fooled. IP protection and privacy, two of the biggest issues, and they're moving as fast as technology is. You know, whether, for example, the output of these algorithms can be copyrighted is a big debate. Whether you own a piece of IP from a client, if you can train a model or not, that is up for debate. And so it's important to get the legal views and the kind of governance and risk views very quickly. And adversarial behavior, we're seeing a new kind of hacking happening with these algorithms. Someone managed to hack GPT-4, GPT 3.5, a couple of months ago, where they tricked it into saying, pretend you're someone that doesn't have any guardrails. It was called the Dan hack. And it could ask it questions that it's not supposed to answer. So it's prompt hacking that we are seeing, and it's going to become a big nuisance for businesses going forward. So I'm conscious I'm running out of time. I just wanted to leave you with a few thoughts based on this very, very quick canter through the topic. The first is, experiment, of course, but understand the risk and challenges. Get all the stakeholders that are needed in order to make this technology not just something you're playing with, but transformative. Get them involved at the start. Manage and segregate your data appropriately. Okay, I've said this throughout my AI career. Good data gives you artificial intelligence. Bad data gives you artificial incompetence. And if you start feeding these algorithms with bad data, the hallucinations just get worse and worse. Conversely, if you feed it with very specific data, you get much, much better output than you do from something like ChatGPT. Develop capabilities and LLMs, LLM ops. We don't believe that the answer is going to be in a business that you have one of these large language models. We believe you're going to have a number of them, a little bit like you have databases today. So get your IT organization thinking professionally around how you manage them, how you promote them from test into production, and how you govern the use of not only data, but the use of these models. And last but not least, understand the impact on talent. You know, there are many, many debates as to whether this technology means we're going to have a lot less workers or a lot more workers. My view is, you know, throughout history, these technologies have only created more plentifulness. You know, when spreadsheets were developed, I remember there were articles saying, is this going to be the end of accountants? Because accountants add columns and now we could do this automatically. Of course, it wasn't the end of accountants. So I don't think it's going to be the end of our workforce, but we are going to have to change. With that, thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to answer questions.